Spider-Man Miles Morales is Insomniac's offshoot of their critically acclaimed 2018 game Spider-Man. This is a game I absolutely adored. It's in my top 10 favorite games of all time. As a diehard Spider-Man fan, it sort of gave me everything I was looking for and more, which is why I was looking forward to checking out this game. So in this one, Peter Parker has gone on vacation with Mary Jane, and he leaves New York City in Miles' hands while he's away. Miles, of course, he's unsure that he's up to the challenge, and through a roughly 5 to 6 hour main campaign, he learns that he too can bear the weight of the title Spider-Man. Now, just from the jump, this is not an in-depth review of every single aspect of this game. I am a busy guy, and I didn't have time to devote dozens of hours into this. I literally checked it out from my local library and breezed through the main campaign with just a few side detours to the sites. So if you want to see an in-depth review of this, of every little aspect, there's a million other YouTube reviews that you can go check out. But first, just my initial thoughts on this. The good, if you enjoy the gameplay of the original 2018 Insomniac Spider-Man game, you're going to love this. Swinging through the city of New York is just a joy, and I know this has been said a million times, but it really gets you into feeling like you're Spider-Man. You can do tricks and stuff. I didn't bother with any of that, but I never once used the fast travel function to go anywhere. And this is a really, really large map. I think that's a testament to how well they succeeded in just swinging around and making that an enjoyable thing. Miles himself has all the basic stuff as Peter. You'll get your gadgets, which I rarely used. You can unlock costumes and whatnot. It's all pretty similar to the 2018 game, with the exception that Miles has additional powers that Peter does not. Miles, for example, has his bioelectricity, which allows for shock effects. He can go invisible, etc. It kind of puts a new visual sheen on the gameplay that isn't too different from the original game, so you get to see a lot more shiny, sparkly effects, which is kind of cool. There are a couple really standout sequences in this game, particularly dealing with Rhino, which to my memory is the only classic Spider-Man villain in the game. You do get Prowler. Prowler is in this, but he's not really a villain per se. He's just sort of there to assist and do what he thinks is best for Miles. So you do get to fight Prowler, for example, but it's not a situation where you're like, oh my god, Prowler's being a bad guy and I'm trying to stop him or anything like that. But early on, you have to actually guide Rhino through a busy mall as he's smashing things to pieces, and sort of you jump on his back and you're trying to guide him around to avoid obstacles and civilians. And this actually made me sort of exclaim out loud. It was a ton of fun. I was like, wow, this is really cool. The final fight with him later on is also a lot of fun. You got to sort of ram him into these various, I think they're vehicles or something, and knock his armor off and to take him out. Really, really cool stuff. There's also an awesome sequence on a bridge. I think I first saw this when there was a trailer for it. You kind of see a little bit of this bridge sequence, but you literally have to fight your way through this bridge as it's falling apart, and then there's a whole sequence where you're trying to save all these pedestrians. Super cool, super memorable. It sort of transported me back to the best parts of that original 2018 Insomniac game. On the downside, this game suffers from a been there, done that sort of feel. Now the story is very predictable. It's another, oh no, turns out Prowler isn't the only person Miles is close to that turns out to be a villain. It's a very common motif in Spider-Man stories, and I don't know if it was just, man, this was so close to the last one I played or something, but I just kind of felt like, I didn't need to see this. They could have done something a little bit better with that, I think. You kind of see it coming from a mile away. If I cut out a few of the side quests I did just to sort of break up the monotony of the story, you can fly through the main quest in 5 hours. Probably less than that if you're a good gamer, which I'm not. So the Roxxon Corporation is back in this one. They're just sort of your general bad guy fodder for you to beat up, same as the previous game. Same goes for the Underground. They're this new sort of faction that's trying to stop Roxxon. They're just super generic as well. They sort of seem like poor imitations of Mr. Negative's goons from the first game. Now, the first game was great because Mr. Negative was a cool villain that hadn't really been utilized in any other sort of media. So you kind of got that fresh feeling when you were playing that original game, but you still got to see the classic Spider-Man villains sort of all weave into the story and how they all sort of come into play. So you had that freshness of a brand new villain with new effects and new visuals. This one, Just kind of boring, to be honest. Other than a few cool sequences, there isn't a lot memorable about this game. I don't really care a whole lot about Miles Morales and all the people around him. It's not that I dislike Miles Morales as a character. It's just, hey man, I grew up in the 80s. I'm a Peter Parker Spider-Man kind of guy, and all of the characters attached to Peter Parker are the characters that I attach to. I think this game is really for that younger generation, people in their teens, early 20s, that their Spider-Man, they're kind of growing up with Miles Morales as their Spider-Man, and I just couldn't connect to any of these characters at all. And so I was just kind of going through the motions as I was playing this. That being said, I don't think it's a terrible game by any means. There's still a lot to do if you really love the world. There seem to be plenty of side quests. It's all done on this app now. So whereas in the first game, if I remember correctly, it was like a police scanner that Peter Parker sort of keys in on and to stop robberies and things of that. This time, Miles' friend creates like an app, and New Yorkers can request Spider-Man help them through this app. So you can actually get into it and do a lot of side missions that way. Again, not something I connect with because I barely use a cell phone. So an app is not something that I'm really sort of keen on. But, you know, there are some cool sequences. Like some of the few things I did do, like there was a dude who wanted to get like a selfie with Spider-Man. And so I swung over to where he was at. And as I was getting the selfie, there were a bunch of gas lines exploding all over the building that was across the street. And so that's sort of like the segue into the quest. You do this one little sort of goofy, you know, millennial sort of, hey, get a selfie with me, and then the quest triggers. So those are cool, and I'm sure there's a ton of them in the game. Again, I didn't really spend a whole lot of time doing that kind of stuff, but what I will say about Insomniac in the original Spider-Man game and in this one, for the sort of few side quests I did, it really makes you feel like the quote-unquote friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Like there's a side quest I did on this where a guy lost his cat, and you had to use your spider tracking skills to go around and find his lost cat for him. Or this sort of thing where the gas lines are exploding. You know, not everything has to be an end-of-the-world event where everything is super, you know, serious and, you know, we have to do all these big, giant things. It's really nice to be able to swing around the city and go collect pigeons. You know, it seems like a silly thing, or just swing around and listening to the various podcasts. J. Jonah Jameson is in this, for example, so you can listen and do that kind of stuff, and it's just a pleasure. So they took sort of what worked with the 2018 game and just sort of expanded on that for Miles Morales. And for what it's worth, I thought it was an enjoyable 5-6 hours. I definitely recommend, if you are into the original 2018 Insomniac game, play through this one. There are story beats in this that are going to play into Spider-Man 2, which is coming out. So if you want to make sure you know every little thing going into the next one, you'll definitely want to play through the main storyline of this. But from what I understand, this was not a full-priced game as well. I think it was $40 when it came out. Again, I just checked it out free from my local library. I highly recommend, if you are somewhere and just like, hey, I don't want to spend any money on a game, but I want to just play through it quick, go to your local library, check it out. That's what I did with this game. It does feel like slightly larger DLC to the original Spider-Man game, but that's all right, right? It's an okay time. If I'm going to give this a rating grade, C+. Probably won't revisit this one again just because I'm not super into the characters and the app and all that stuff. But hey, the base game is super solid. Swinging around doing that, it's all fun. Check it out if you like the original Insomniac game.